Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is David Hill, and I'm the superintendent of School District 93. We're here tonight to talk about adolescent vaping, and we're so happy that you're here. The microphone is not really for you, it's for Facebook, because we are streaming live on Facebook right now for people who couldn't make it. This is a very important topic. As you paid attention to the news, it's becoming a little bit of a national epidemic, and we wanted to put this on to provide some information to our families to help them have better knowledge of what's going on in the vaping environment. First and foremost, I want to thank the two groups that helped us put this together today. First, the Village of Carroll Stream. Our mayor is here, Frank Savarino. Thank you so much for all that you do for us. And the Carroll Stream Park for this wonderful venue that we're here tonight. So thank you very much to Jim Reuter and his crew at the the Park District of Carroll Stream. We have two fantastic speakers today to talk to you about what's going on in the vaping community. First, we have Officer Pablo Castro from the Carroll Stream Police Department, and we are extremely proud in District 93 that he is our SRO. And we have Dr. Johnson from Northwestern Medicine to talk about some of the medical situations going on right now with vaping. So with that being said, again, thank you so much for being here this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Officer Castro.
Hi, I'm Officer Castro. I'm with the Carroll Stream Police Department. I'm currently assigned to our Special Operations Unit, where I'm assigned as a school resource officer at J Stream Middle School. Some of my job duties at J Stream Middle School are prevention, and one of the things that I've been doing recently is talking about what's going on with e-cigarettes and vaping. And last year I did a presentation for administrators. This year staff at J Stream, the 8th grade staff at J Stream, asked for a presentation as well, so I did that with them. And so now I'm talking to you guys. And I think it's just important that we kind of have an idea of what's going on out there. And there are some things that are unknown. And I've got a really good relationship with the police department, the school district, and all of us. We're all teamwork here trying to work together. I'm going to go ahead and just start with some basic information. And an electronic cigarette, an e-cigarette. An electronic cigarette device containing nicotine-based liquid that is vaporized and inhaled used to simulate the experience of smoking tobacco. Vaping, the action or practice of inhaling and exhaling vapor produced by an e-cigarette or similar device. A Juul. I'll show everyone what a Juul is. This is probably one of the most popular devices that is out there. Juuling. So juuling and vaping are kind of the same thing. So if someone says they're juuling, it's the same thing. It means the same thing as vaping. Juul pods, that is the cartridge that's in the Juul. And I'll be able to show that to you guys here in a little bit. That's the cartridge that's in the Juul. Nicotine, a toxic colorless or yellowish oily liquid that is the chief active constituent of tobacco. This is what's in a lot of the e-juices. Aerosol, a substance enclosed under pressure and able to be released as a fine spray, typically by means of propelling gas. So aerosol, that is what is being inhaled into the lungs, and that's what's coming out into vapor. The e-juice, that's the liquid that is in an e-cigarette or Juul pod. So why do kids vape? When I talk to a student who has been in trouble or who was in possession of a vaping device or an electronic cigarette, I ask them, why do you vape? And their response is, it's very typical responses, I don't know. And it's almost something like when you ask your son or daughter, why'd you leave the door open, or why didn't you close the garage door? And you get the, I don't know. So then I ask them, well, tell me, how'd you get it? Or tell me what's in it. And so we talk about those things. And one of the things that I've learned from talking with kids is it's really easy for them to get. It's really easy for them to get. They are either getting it from somebody at home, a relative, or a friend. It's really easy for them to get. What's in it? They think it's just flavoring that's in it. A lot of the kids, when I ask them what's in it, they don't say nicotine's in there, or they don't say a drug is in there. They say some type of flavoring. A lot of these products, and you'll see, they pretty much all contain nicotine, but the kids don't know that. And then to them, it's perceived as less harmful than cigarettes. It looks cool. They think that it looks cool. There are a lot of ads out there that market for young teens. And to belong. Kids want to belong. They want to be part of a group. So those are just some of the reasons that we talk about when we're talking about vaping or e-cigarettes. But a lot of the times is, I don't know, Officer Castro. I don't know why I had that. I don't know why I did that. And you know what? I believe them. I don't think they really do know exactly why, other than a lot of these things that are up here. It is very, very easy to hide. It's very, very easy to hide. Most of the parents that I come across, that I talk to, have no idea that their son or daughter was vaping. Don't even know what it is. The odor can be very disguisable in that it can smell very fruity. The odor doesn't last very long. And then the aerosol that's released into the air disappears pretty quickly. And then the Juul device, the e-cigarette, looks like a flash drive. It looks pretty cool. So a regular parent or somebody who doesn't know what this is could easily mistake it for a flash drive and not know what it is. Can be used in the bathroom, can be used even in a classroom. Someone in here could Juul right now, and most of us in here wouldn't know that it was being done if they did it really fast. It is very, very easy to hide, which makes it hard for parents. It makes it hard for staff. It makes it hard for all of us to prevent teens from doing this. There's a huge marketing advantage. Flavor e-cigarettes right now are not included in the Tobacco Control Act. Cigarettes right now, the only flavor that's out there pretty much is menthol. Everything else is illegal. But when we're talking about e-cigarettes, there's so many different flavors out there. 81% of the kids who ever used tobacco products started with a flavor product. 99% of the e-cigarettes sold in 2015 contain nicotine. I went to the store looking for products to show like staff members, to show parents, to show teachers, and I would walk into a store and I would ask for something that did not have nicotine, like a flavoring that did not have nicotine. I ended up going to like maybe 3 or 4 different stores, and no one could give me a flavor that did not have nicotine in it. The 2018 National Youth Tobacco Survey found out that there was a 78% increase among high school kids who were vaping or using e-cigarettes. Middle school, there was a 48% increase. The reason that I have this up here is because there's kind of a debate as when do you start prevention? So when we're talking about middle school, we're talking about 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, 48% increase. So at what age do we start educating our youth about the dangers of this? I can tell you that I currently teach the alcohol and tobacco health effects and facts to kids in 5th grade. And last year I would ask kids, when we got to the tobacco part, I would ask kids, what is secondhand smoke? And maybe 4 or 5 kids in the class would raise their hand and they would say, you know, Officer Castro, that's when you breathe in someone else's smoke from smoking. Oh. At the end of last year and this year, I asked the same question, and almost the entire class, when I ask what secondhand smoke is, raises their hand. What do you think they tell me? They think it's vaping. They think it's vaping. I'll ask kids. I'll say, what's secondhand smoke? And the whole class, at the end of last year and this year, they all raised their hands. And they say vaping. It's vaping, right, Officer Castro? Like I didn't tell them what vaping was. They brought it up to me. And then I explained to them, no, it's not vaping. But where are they seeing that? Where are they hearing that? Right? They're seeing the smoke come out of somebody who's vaping, and they're thinking it's vaping. So I think this presentation is good for you guys to go home and spark that conversation with your son or daughter about the dangers of vaping, because there are a lot of dangers that come with it that we just don't know. What is an e-cigarette? So there's 4 basic parts to an e-cigarette. There's a battery. There's a microprocessor. The microprocessor, that's the part where when you put your mouth on the e-cigarette and you start to inhale, that's the part that activates the heater. The other part is the heater, and then there's a cartridge or tank that holds the e-liquid. Officer Castro, why do we need to know about this? Why do we need to know about this? Well, the bottom part here kind of shows one that's kind of broken up in pieces. And I like to show staff and parents this because I think it's important for you guys to know that a lot of these parts that these e-cigarettes have are interchangeable, which means you might find a part in a bedroom and not know what it is. You might find something laying on the ground and not know what it is. So a lot of these different parts are really, really small, kind of like a puzzle, and then they all kind of fit together to create the e-cigarette. There's 4 different kinds of e-cigarettes. There's disposable kinds, there's the rechargeable kinds, there's the tanks, and then there's the refillable kinds. So there's 4 basic kinds. This top one's called a sarin drop. This one a couple years ago was pretty popular, and it's very, very, very small. And kids were going around saying, "Do you want to do a drop?" And that's what they were referring to. So when I'm talking about vaping and juuling, if somebody else were to say, "Do you want to do a drop?" They were talking about this sarin drop. So this was another form of an e-cigarette. This is currently the most popular one that's out there. This is the current packaging for the Juul. That's the current packaging for the electronic cigarette Juul. And then this is the cartridge right here, and that's the e-juice in there. And up here it looks really big, but they're pretty tiny. They're very, very small, and they're pretty slick. I mean, it looks like a flash drive. That's what it looks like. Juul claims that one of these e-liquid cartridges equals about 20 to 40 cigarettes or 1 to 2 pack of cigarettes. Now remember, when I ask kids, what's in your e-cigarette or what's in this cartridge here, most kids don't know. They don't know that it contains nicotine. They don't know. They just think it's flavoring. They think it's something cool to do. I don't know, Officer Castro. I don't know why I did that. They don't know what they're putting into their bodies. So this was Juul's original ad compared to this now, right? So they got in trouble, so they had to change the way they marketed people to our youth. But you can see the original ad, like who is that getting to buy Juuls? Is it getting the current smoker who's been smoking for many, many years, or is this who is this targeting? So when I talk to staff and when I talk to parents, I just think it's important. I'm not going to touch too much into this because I know there's a doctor here who will touch base on some of the things that go into our bodies and come out of our bodies, but it's just really important. There is a huge unknown because what happens is when this liquid that's in the e-cigarette or in the vape pen, when that is heated, it turns it into something else, and we don't know what that something else is. We have no idea. So we know the ingredients that are in there, and we know what's being put in that e-juice, but after it's heated by the microprocessor in the heater, we don't know what it's turning it into. There's a huge unknown. And even the CDC is having a hard time trying to figure out why there are being so many health concerns reference to this. So behaviors to look for. I had parents who asked me, Officer Castro, what do I look for? And it is really hard to know if your son or daughter is vaping. I'm just going to be honest with you. It is very, very difficult. I did put some behaviors up here, but not one of these things that is up here, or 2 of these things that are up here, or 3 of these things. Not all. If 3 or 4 of these things you're noticing in your teen, that doesn't mean they're vaping. But these are just clues. These are just clues. If you're smelling a fruity flavor, or there's a new cologne or perfume that's being used that you don't recognize, just remember that the odor doesn't last very, very long. Increased thirst. The reason I put this up here is because when you vape, it does dehydrate you. It does dehydrate you. So you might get more of a dry mouth or a cotton type of mouth if someone is vaping. So you might see that. Finding paraphernalia. Again, if you find something that just doesn't seem right, or you find like a small little light, a lot of these things have all these different gadgets to it to make it attractive for teens. The law. So in July, Tobacco Illinois 21 law, there were some changes to the law. And one of the big ones was that it bans the sale of tobacco products, vaping products, and liquid nicotine products to anyone under the age of 21. Awesome. Another thing was there was a sales tax increase as well on cigarettes. It also put a lot of ownership on the business owners. So you're supposed to provide, business owners are supposed to provide more training for their employees on check and ID. There's supposed to be signage in a tobacco establishment that sells tobacco products. So those were all things that were added. I put this middle one in here because I think it's important. This was always in there, but it just, I think it's important, and I know sometimes a lot of parents don't know this, but one of the things is it allows us to keep doing compliance checks here in Carroll Stream. And what I mean by compliance checks is we're allowed to use a minor to go into a tobacco store and attempt to purchase cigarettes, tobacco products. And if we find that the minor is successful, and they're obviously working with us, they're working with the police, there could be fines that are set by the mayor. The business could be shut down. So there's a lot of different things that could be done. We do those compliance checks on a regular basis. One of the other things we do is if we get phone calls and say, hey, you know, this place in Carroll Stream is selling to underage, well, we'll start an investigation and we can send someone in there to attempt to purchase. So that's some of the things that we do. The one thing that it also did was it removed illegal possession for anyone under the age of 21. So the state law took away the possession charge. So that was something that it took away. It also took away any type of smoking prevention class. So that was also included in the law as well. What's really cool is we have village ordinances in Carroll Stream. And one of the village ordinances that we have in Carroll Stream, we amended our village ordinance and we added the possession charge. So in Carroll Stream, if you are in possession or you purchase a tobacco product and you're under the age of 21, you can be detained and issued a citation or a hang-on ticket, which is kind of like a parking ticket. So those two things can be done. And then a letter is also sent home to the parents saying that the police came in contact with your minor, and a letter is sent home explaining to them the violation. Parents. As a parent, you have the power to influence your teen's decision. Use today's presentation to educate not only yourself, but other kids as well, and your son or daughter. Help your child understand the facts about vaping. Discuss with them the dangers of the unknown chemicals that they are putting into their bodies. And then the possibility of addiction to nicotine that goes along with vaping. And then the last part is set an example. And if you don't want your son or daughter to smoke, show them and don't vape yourself. So that's pretty much the end of my presentation. And I want to thank you guys for being here today. It's a very important topic. And I think that with us educating each other and working with each other, we can all help each other out, and hopefully we can help students who are involved with this. Thank you.
Is this better? Good. Okay, thank you. Okay. So I come from addiction medicine, and nicotine is a psychoactive drug. I don't like to throw medical terms around, but it's a drug that affects the brain. And it also affects the circulatory system, and in smoking there are many health hazards associated with it. So that's one of the things I want to talk about is if we expose our teens to nicotine, particularly at the preteen and the early teen years, their risk of developing chemical dependence, even to if it's only to cigarettes, is much greater if they're exposed when they're 10, 11, 12 years of age. So the later that we start smoking, the greater the chance that it won't become a lifelong habit. There are things about drugs that act on the brain. There's tolerance. We start out having a smoke now and then, and for some people it becomes a smoke more and more often then, and ultimately there's a tolerance developed because the 1 or 2 cigs don't last as long for us, and then we end up needing more and more. And if we forget our cigarettes or we run out of our cigarettes, then we begin to get anxious and nervous as we experience withdrawal from this drug of nicotine. So there is tolerance and there is dependence, and patients who are taking the cigarettes will develop a dependence on it so that they have to have it regularly. And we've all seen people in meetings where they're having a smoke or they're having a meeting and maybe the meeting runs long, and the first thing they do when they get out of that meeting is run where they can have a cigarette. In our treatment center, we have a nice patio on the outside, and at the end of the group session or the therapy session, people can't wait to get out on the patio to light up and have a smoke. The question of whether we use the word addiction involves doing dangerous things to get the drugs, and that's not usually associated with nicotine use. There's a timeline. If I start smoking when I'm 12 years old, then I've got another 8 or 10 years on someone who starts smoking when they're 21. There is an association between the amount of cigarettes we smoke and the amount we smoke, the number of packs, and the number of years we've been smoking them. So if we start when we're 8, 10, 12 years, I'm sorry, maybe 8 years old too, but 10, 12 years of age, we've added another 8 years to the length of time we're exposed to the smoke. We know about lung disease, chronic bronchitis, coughing, people who get up and they say, oh, I have a smoker's cough. There's a risk of lung cancer associated with long-term use of cigarettes. So when we talk about vaping, we may be talking about something that's safer. People are saying, well, I don't smoke. My friend Andrea Barthwell, I like to brag about this because she was a special assistant to the president on drug use reduction. I get to talk to her every year or so at a meeting. So, but she made a very blanket statement, which politicians don't do, except maybe the current president. I'm not sure what you think on that, but she made a very blanket statement. She said, any psychoactive substance, which includes nicotine, that is taken with a fire, you light it up, is bad. It's a blanket statement that if you take a substance that you light a fire to get it, it's bad. That's a very strong statement on her part. So vaping came along, and people who wanted to quit smoking thought, well, I don't have to get the nicotine in the fire anymore, or they could get the gum or the lozenges or the patches to get the nicotine without having the fire. So the vaping could be a good thing for adults, but in young children, in 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, when they start to use nicotine, they increase their risk of a long-term addiction process, a long-term dependency process as a result of starting early, and they get 8 years more than someone else. So if it's related to how long and how many cigarettes, then the risk of these diseases of heart and lung disease are greater. There's some economics here. I talk to patients who are in economic trouble and they've been using drugs and they've lost their job and their spouse and their car and they're in deep trouble, but they're still smoking a pack or two a day. And then I sit down, because I can do this pretty quickly, and I say, what are you paying for your cigs? And they say $6 a pack. Some people from Chicago are paying a lot more than that. And I say, let's say 2 packs at $6 in 30 days. We're talking $360 a month. So the economic impact is great. And so that 12-year-old kid that starts smoking is going to have another 8 years of expenses added to his life. I don't know if any of you have asthma or chronic lung problems, but if you have to take an inhaler for that treatment by your doctor, inhalers are very expensive. They cost a great deal of money. So that we're helping to sign people up to need fairly expensive long-term medical treatment from their smoking as well. So the economic factor is an important thing to consider. The other things people have to get, when their lung disease gets bad, they have to have home oxygen and maybe more hospital visits and so on. The other thing is think about your neighbors when you're smoking. The secondhand smoke is another issue. So they now are defining secondhand smoke as from vaping, so it's something is a little new, but secondhand smoke is recognized as a risk factor. People that live in families where there's a smoker are also at greater risk of smoking-related diseases. So we might be willing to think about adults vaping to help so they wouldn't smoke, but the exposure to the nicotine, even without the fire, is a risk factor for young children. So that's why I make an issue with even vaping in the teenagers. I want to make my editorial remark on the flavorings. I wanted to think of an intuitive way to describe it because so I thought of going to Starbucks or Seattle or Dunkin' Donuts, or I've left out a few others. But you go there and you pay $6 for a cup of coffee and you take a whiff and that aroma of that flavored coffee is there, and then you taste it, and the taste of that flavored coffee is another good experience for you. But if you happen to accidentally suck a half a teaspoon of that coffee down into your airway, it's very irritating and coughing. So even if we don't know what the chemicals are or what the risks of that exhaled heated substance are, we know that it's very irritating to the airway. Officer mentioned about menthol. In the 1950s, the advertising, that's the big TVs in black and white that your grandparents or parents used. They had glamorous actors and actresses, even in black and white, who would talk about how this cigarette was less irritating than the other brand. And they even insulted the Chicagoans a little because they said a New York ear, nose, and throat specialist said that our brand is less irritating than the other brand. And so the concern about irritating people with cigarettes has been going on for quite a long time. And it was in the 50s that the Surgeon General started to raise public issues about the dangers of smoking. So the point of this is that the membranes of your mouth can taste things. Our taste buds on our tongue are quite sensitive. People who are specially trained can taste different kinds of coffees and differentiate them, and more expensive to cheaper. The nasal mucous membranes have an incredible ability to separate all kinds of aromas, but the lining of your bronchial tubes is not made for most chemicals. So think about common, ordinary, everyday things. If you tasted lemonade or a cola, coffee, you get it into your airway, that's an irritating experience compared to smelling and tasting. So I would like to give you the advice that I won't go too far back into history, but my microbiology professor in medical school said when we were talking about medical innovations, he said read the Tribune, and I don't know what news feed you use, so I would paraphrase that and say read your news feeds, because about every other day there's some new news breaking about more people who got very sick in the hundreds, or someone, now it's in the 20s, I believe, of people who actually died associated with vaping. So there's sometimes confusing information. When you get the breaking news, it isn't always complete. For example, the Brits are telling their citizens that vaping is 95% safer than cigarette smoking. Well, I think if it is for adults, that's fine. But once again, not for kids. Thank you very much. Do we ask for questions now, or? Okay. Someone have a question? Just call it out. It's okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are the pods that are is there any other drug being introduced through students buying them from other students or whatever?
I'm sorry, say the question one more time. Sorry.
No, with the use of pods, a student told me that, you know what, there's nothing wrong with them because they're all commercially packaged. You're not buying them in an alley. You're not, so they're not street drugs.
Very good.
But I'm wondering if they have the ability to be tampered with or to be made into something more potent.
So the question is, are the pods that are being put in cartridges, can those be tampered with? And the question is, the answer is yes, they can be. So this is what the empty pods look like, and these are empty right now. These can be filled with any type of liquid substance, and whether that liquid substance contains THC or it contains something else. Again, it's that unknown. But yes, here in Carroll Stream, we have cited people who've been in possession of these that have THC in them, that have the drug in them. So yes, they can be.
Another factor, if I may, is that some of these are imported from unknown sources overseas. So there may be some safety in buying known brands, but and it is possible that they'd be adulterated. That's true.
I know you mentioned you started this in 5th grade and 6th grade. Obviously today, everything is happening even in kindergarten and 1st grade. I have 2 kids, one is in 1st and 3rd. And they hear things all the time. Is this something that the school district may implement where younger children, I'm not talking about the 1st grade, I think they might be a little bit too young, but like 3rd and on. I feel like my son is almost 9 and I feel like he understands a lot more than my daughter does.
The question is the district looking to bring education to our children at a younger age than traditionally has been 5th grade? And yes, we are looking at ways to continue to bring information to our children at younger ages to make them aware of what's going on and the dangers and risks associated with this kind of behavior. Thank you. Could I ask Dr. Johnson a question? Would that be okay? Dr. Johnson, what are some of the impacts of the heated oils on the interior of the lungs in children?
I don't know anything beyond the fact that potential for irritation, but in chemistry, if you heat something up, the reaction is faster. So that would be a factor that's a heated oil compared to. But as Officer mentioned also, once they're heated, some chemical reactions occur that they don't know what the source is. That's another unknown in these sources. Yeah.
And I will say, from talking with teens who have been in possession of a vape, and they're either getting school consequences or they're meeting with me to discuss their consequences, I will tell you that a lot of the kids that I talk to think it's like a water vapor that's coming out. And I explain to them that it's not a water vapor that's coming out of these vape pens or electronic cigarettes. It is not water vapor. And the truth is that once that e-liquid juice, whether it contains nicotine or whether it contains THC, we don't know what it turns it into once it's heated. We don't know, and that's going into the lungs, and then that's coming back out. And so we don't know what is actually what's actually happening inside our bodies. But we know it's not good.
You mentioned THC. Where would that be coming from for them to be able to do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of like any other drug. Where do drugs come from? How do kids, how do teens end up coming in contact with drugs? And what I like to tell parents, and I'm being brutally honest, if a kid wants something, they're going to get it. They're going to get it. So it's up to us as parents to know about these things so that we can reinforce those positive skills. I'm teaching 5th graders resistance strategies. I'm teaching 5th graders to say no, and not just how to say, not just saying no, but how to say no, and coming up with different reasons or excuses. And so I do a lot of role playing with the 5th graders, and we're not talking about drugs, but can I copy off your homework, right? And so we come up with different resistance strategies, right, so that they can use later in the future, and they can feel comfortable saying no to their friends.
Do you have any samples of those kind of things? Because we work with a youth group, and resistance strategy sounds like something, well, maybe we all do.
So we have saying no, walking away. We have coming up with a reason or excuse, changing the subject. So we have different things like that that we actually work with the kids, and the kids actually get up and practice. And even the kids who are very shy and timid actually get into it, and we work with them on different ways of saying no. And even we work on different ways of even disagreeing with each other.
So preparing in case you're offered.
Yes.
For the fifth graders, because that's the district 93 schools that you're visiting,
Yes.
is this the first year, or you've already been doing this program, you've been coming to schools?
Yeah, so I've been going to the fifth graders now for I think maybe 8 or 9 years, for about 8 or 9.
Have you done it yet this year for the schools?
I've started, yes. Yep, so I've already started.
By any chance?
What's that?
Roy DeShane by any chance?
I will start Roy DeShane in the middle of the school year.
Okay.
Yeah, I will be at Roy.
I hadn't heard of that, a fifth grader, and usually my kids will tell me, and I'm like, I haven't heard about this, so I was kind of like wondering if you already went there, so.
Yeah, so it's really cool because I'll ask the kids and I tell the kids, go home and talk to your parents. Tell them how your day was. Tell them that you had a police officer in the classroom. And so the kids get really excited about that, and then they go ahead and they tell mom and dad that there was a police officer in the classroom. And so that's where the conversation sparks between parents and the kids, right? I don't go into too much details, but that's where you as parents can say, you know, you've experienced this or you went through this. So it sparks that conversation that can be really tough to have with our kids.
Question from online. Is secondhand smoke from the vapes the same as secondhand smoke from the cigarettes?
As far as I know, it isn't, but it is not, it still has the potential to contain unknown chemicals from this reaction that occurs. So I think the big message here is that this is a very unknown area of not only the legitimate, if you will, or the larger, more presumably legitimate makers, but there's also a lot of exogenous additional things added in the vape process. It's a platform for other substances. So I think that's why I don't have a specific answer for what to do, but I do think that caution is important because people are getting sick and ending up in intensive care units, and some of them are dying. And do we want to be the guinea pigs? Do our kids want to be the guinea pigs for this process?
So you're saying that nobody knows what's inside these oils?
I'm sure that someone's going to figure that out because there's,
Go to a bag of
yeah.
chips, you say, you see all the stuff that's in it. Are the oils like that as well at some point where we can see that? What's in it?
The question for you folks at home is what's in, right? Is that what you say? What's actually in? The, yes. Perfect.
Market for somebody to just put in their body without knowing what's in it.
So there is, if you look at the labels, it does tell you what's in it and some of the ingredients that are in it. The problem is that the ingredients that are in it, again, we don't know what happens once they're heated up. And so that's part of the danger. So there's food preservatives in there. There's nicotine in there. There's different things in the e-liquid juice, but once it's heated up and it goes into the lungs, we're not sure what the heat is actually doing to it. So there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different studies that are out there, but we just don't know.
Are these products regulated? Like cigarettes are regulated, so are vaping products regulated by the government?
Yeah, are vaping products regulated by the government? Ooh, I don't think so. No. Yeah.
My impression is that they're not.
Yeah.
So you're addressing the possession aspect of ordinances, but there aren't standards of how many milligrams of this or that, or milligrams not permitted of different substances. So we don't, that's that mystery of we don't know what we're getting.
Yeah, so not regulated by the FDA.
Yeah.
But you may have seen, if you've watched the news, there are some states now that have banned not only the Juul product, but Juul entirely until they do some more research to find out what is truly going on with our children and what's happening with the conditions of vaping.
A question from the medical perspective. Have you seen, like, firsthand any side effects or, I guess, patients or things that have happened as a result of vaping?
Unfortunately, our pulmonologist is in an emergency procedure, and he would have a better answer to that. I work in an addiction center, and I don't see, people don't come in to see me because they're having trouble breathing. So I'll have to put off that answer.
The answer is yes.
Okay, well, thank you.
I was with him this morning, and there was a question in the audience about that, and he has had several patients personally that he's treated, and none of them have expired, none of them have died, but he's definitely seen patients. Like maybe PR visits? Well, he's an interventional pulmonologist, so he sees pretty sick folks. So I didn't get any more detail, but CDH is seeing these patients for sure.
For you at home, to recap all of that, there are dangers to the interior of the lungs that pulmonologists are seeing with people who.
This is for the doctor. Are you seeing more patients in your practice who may have started vaping but now are on to some other type of addiction product, whether cigarettes or alcohol?
So the question is, has the doctor seen people that are vaping that have now transferred to some other drug?
That's a good question. Is the use of nicotine an entry-level drug? Is the use of marijuana an entry-level drug? The vaping is pretty new, and I haven't talked to anyone who said that it happened to them, but I do believe that the issue of a psychoactive drug that keeps bringing you back, that pleasure center, the relief with the drug, I consider that, I didn't get into that in my talk, but I consider nicotine to be an entry-level drug. And especially the risk of addiction is higher in the preteens and early teenage era. There's studies on that.
One thing we haven't talked about tonight, we specifically talked about the jewel company, but we haven't talked about the black market, where they're just, these other vaping devices look like everyday things around your house, like a cell phone or lipstick case, or even a cup from Starbucks. They're disguised to look like everyday items in your home. So if you pass by something, give it a jiggle, check it out, because it could be a black market vaping device.
So the comment for you guys at home, the comment was, be vigilant of what's at home, because a lot of these particular black market devices are being marketed to look like traditional household items that you may think nothing of, but in reality they are truly some kind of a vape device.
Well, I agree with you, and when I talk to my substance users, they're buying little packages of things on the street corner, and you don't know if it has heroin in it. It probably has some heroin and maybe some fentanyl, but also might have a little street gravel or talcum powder or other things. So you're buying in an unknown. A lot of products have a good housekeeping seal of approval. I tell my patients, if you went to buy a head of lettuce at the Jewel store, Jewell, you would, if you didn't like the head of lettuce, it was a little rotted or something when you got home, you could take it back and they'll exchange it. But there are no such, when I ask my substance users, if you went back to your dealer on the street corner, would he give you a refund? They laugh. Okay. So, but yes, I don't want to say you should go buy the Jewell, but at least that's a brand name that has some uniformity in its product. But there's a whole bunch of other people selling things that you don't know what they're adding, in addition to the basic problems that officer mentioned of the heated, what chemical reactions occur with the heated liquid.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Officer, are you seeing the black market items as far as the disguise?
Not too much. I've probably come across maybe a handful of black market items.
So it's primarily jewel.
Yeah, and then the other tank devices that I have, I can show people when you guys come up here. So I've got some samples up here that I can show, but this is the teardrop one that I talked about. I mean, you can see how small it is. And then one of the tank devices, you saw a kid put a sticker on it. So I have not seen too many, maybe a handful of the black market ones, but this is just a piece that was found. And it's got the really cool light that lights up. But no, usually the products are something that's being bought online or at a store that's coming from somewhere else. So I have not seen too many, maybe a handful of them.
Just so we're aware,
Sure.
Any other questions? Anything from you, the audience at home? I want to thank you for being here tonight. I want to thank Officer Castro. I want to thank Dr. Johnson. I want to thank the mayor. And I want to thank the Carroll Stream Park District for hosting us tonight. We are working very hard as a district to help our students understand the dangers of vaping, but we can't do it alone. We need your help, and we need you to be vigilant as well. We're trying to be vigilant, but as you know, we only have your children 6.5 hours a day. So we need your help too. If there's anything you need from the district, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to help you. I think they always kind of say in the education world that it takes a community to raise a child, and we need your help. So thank you so much for coming tonight. Really appreciate it, and take care of yourselves.